Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Manur and I'm a second year PhD student at Oxford University. Today, I want to talk about the reality of a PhD during the lockdown. It has now been a complete year since we have been in a lockdown. The lockdown in the UK was lifted at some point, but not completely, and then we went back into a stricter lockdown near Christmas. And now it's been a complete year of just living with this pandemic situation, and this has, like everything else, has an impact on our PhD degrees as well. I think every student has suffered, whatever degree, whatever level of their education. But as a PhD student, I feel I don't want to complain or sound as someone who is ungrateful, but it's been just too overwhelming. And it feels a lot of restrictions are still in place in the UK. I know it is for the better in the long run, but the thing is that a year of not being able to work in full capacity or not being able to carry out research at the level that you would ideally carry out during a PhD is just, it just doesn't sit well. It just doesn't feel good. So when the lockdown started back in March, we didn't know when we would go back, and it took us until first week of August to be allowed back in the lab. So that was nearly 5 months completely lost, not being able to go in the lab. And for a PhD degree, that is highly dependent on you being in the lab, because I study oncology and my work really depends on me being in the lab working on the samples of cancer patients or cancer cell lines, constructing virus, working on bacterial cultures. It is all lab work. I need the wet lab experience to be able to carry forward my work. The only thing I could do at home was read, probably write a review paper, which I did start but didn't follow through with it because, to be honest, it was just too overwhelming to do anything. With so much uncertainties, I think being productive was not top of the list for anyone. And I did try to stay up to date with everything. We did have 2 to 3 lab meetings every week, but it was just virtual meetings. There has now been a considerable amount of time that we are back in the lab. But the thing is, it is with extreme restrictions, and it is all for the good, but it's restrictive, and that's just the case. So, what is happening now is that we are only allowed to go into the lab such that we plan it way ahead. We have to book shifts. We can't be in the lab all the time. And because they have limited the number of people who can be in the building, who can be in the work area, in the tissue culture facilities, or in a lab bench bay, like one person per bay, which I hope would increase at some point. There is some news of that increasing, but with all those restrictions and with a lot of people needing to work, because everyone who's doing a PhD or is a postdoc in that department or a master's student, they need to be in the lab to get their work done. And to be considerate to each other, we have to book shifts and not block book too many shifts. So it is like we have to plan ahead and also make sure that we clearly outline where we will be working, which equipment we will be using, and then we are supposed to stay there. Do not mingle with other people, do not go into other facilities, or just break the rules, because there are very strict rules at the moment. So being restricted to one particular equipment or one particular lab area means that you can only do so much in a day. And even with the out of hours access being granted and we being able to work on weekends as well, planning your experiments to exact hours, exact equipment being needed, and the exact place that you will be in the building at a time is just stressful. It's been a few months and we are now better at it. I feel I'm much better at it than I was back in August. I am planning ahead. I think everyone's trying to do it, but it's just too stressful to do it. And sometimes with experimental work, it fails, and you might have booked about a shift or two. You might have booked 3 hours thinking that this would work through, and then it doesn't come through. Your cells haven't grown, your staining doesn't work, the microscope doesn't work for you at that moment, some kind of emission is not working, and you need more time, but you can't have it then. And then there's a chance of something going to waste, something not working, and you having to repeat the thing again and again. Although this has become much better and everyone's learning, I am learning, I hope I become better, but it would be much easier if we are onto the road of getting back to a somewhat normal life, which no one knows when it would be, but we can all hope for a better life soon. it's just been too stressful. Apart from the lab work, and apart from everything with the wet lab work and the access to the building, access to the labs, and the time allowed to do the work, I think it is also quite stressful to just be doing a degree, any degree, because I think it's just so isolating, especially in the UK. I don't know what's happening around the world, but I know many places where people are somewhat back to normal. They are able to socialize, to meet people. Just the thing that we're not allowed to socialize, we can't meet people, and I am living alone since Christmas because my housemates who went home for Christmas could not return. They were not allowed to return because of another lockdown being imposed during the Christmas holidays. So a lot of people have not come back to the UK if they went home, or if they've come back to the UK, they are just staying in other places. And I live in college accommodation. Living alone in a college house is just too much. It's been 4 months now that I live alone. Although I quite love and enjoy living alone, I like lesser people around, but it's now a complete year when we have not been socializing, not having anyone to talk to, not having anyone to meet, like physically, even with a social distance that's not allowed at the moment. So even when we are working, because we are a large lab group and we used to socialize, go to the pub sometimes, or like just meet people here and there, have garden parties, and that's not just been possible. And I have actually never enjoyed the British summer because last year was supposed to be my first summer here and it was during the lockdown. And I hope this summer is better, but just the ability of meeting people would be great at this point. I haven't met my lab mates, like, I've only seen them working on their benches from a distance, and I've seen them in virtual meetings. We still do have 2 meetings per week and we see each other virtually. I haven't met my supervisor since a year. I do still meet him virtually twice a week, sometimes even thrice a week, but it's just that not having met people, not having had any connections. So many of my friends who live in college, but they are part of different households, I haven't met them. I've only seen them from an immense distance, or probably just from my balcony when they are down at the garden. And it's just so stressful not being able to see people. And at this point in time, I think I I am fed up from the Zoom meetings and everything because it's just too much. I don't want to live that life for any longer. And especially with a PhD degree, that's extremely isolating on its own. You work all day, you don't get the time to socialize. The only people you do socialize are your lab mates or your workmates or your housemates when you come back home. And all of that has just been taken away. So since lab mates would also be part of different households, you can't meet with them, you can't socialize anywhere. Also, places to socialize are all just closed. And I know it's just for the betterment, and we are all hoping for a better future, for things to go back to normal quite soon. But just the thing that we do not know when it will go back to normal. And at this point, it's mid March. It's already been a year since we are hoping for better days ahead. It's just been too stressful planning ahead and having so many paperworks for safety, security, and personal health care, and taking responsibility for who you're meeting, where you're working, what you're going to do, not moving between benches in the lab, not being in the building for too long, not meeting people, not standing too close to anyone. So just not having any kind of contact or not being able to meet people has been really stressful. And I it's been now almost 2 years that I haven't seen my family. I haven't been able to travel anywhere. I was really hoping to travel this April to Pakistan to go and meet my family, but that's not been possible. And I wouldn't plan in such circumstances where everything is just uncertain because I don't want to be stuck back home and not be able to come back. And it just makes me feel guilty that my PhD is not progressing. Although I did pass my first PhD milestone back in December, even during the lockdown. And my supervisor is really supportive and he says I am progressing and I'm doing well. But it's just not satisfactory for people. Like, if you're doing a PhD, you are ambitious, you want to do a lot of things. And particularly, like, a scientific research requires a lot of work. And if you're not able to do that, it just gives me a lot of guilt and anxiety. Everything that I plan, and I plan a lot and something just goes wrong. And for me, it's a huge setback at this point because it just makes me feel immensely bad for wasting resources or for not being able to plan so well. And just one thing that goes wrong can trigger me a lot. And I think that's happening with a lot of people because with a lot of other stresses, with everything being so uncertain, if your experiments fail, if you cannot see progress in terms of results, that just becomes all the more stressful because you do not know when you will get the next shift in a big block and do that. You can plan that, people are considerable, but it's just a huge amount of guilt that rests with you, because then you might also be blocking a lot of lab shifts just to repeat that experiment. And experiments do fail in normal circumstances. Your experiment would fail, that's okay, you would start again the next day, you might work over the weekend, you might start again. But with knowing that it's a juggle between how many shifts you take, how many you leave for your colleagues, and how you plan your experiments, and especially if you want to shadow someone to learn from them, it's just too much at the moment. And it's now March 2021, and I hope it goes back to normal, because now I am a second year PhD student, and I was supposed to present in a conference this year. Ideally, I would have wanted to be at certain points having certain results, which I have not even managed to start with, which just makes me feel really guilty. I know it's not my fault. It's happening around the world. People have suffered with the UK lockdown. All my colleagues have suffered, but it is just stressful because a PhD is not just a degree, it was supposed to be an experience. And I know there is still time. I still have 2 more years and I still have a lot of time to do it. But having lost an entire year almost, which went into lockdown, into not being able to go into the lab and do stuff, although we did have contingency plans then made up and we have shifted our focus, our projects have been slightly modified, some might not have modified, and we are working around it. But just the fact that we have been stripped of a lot of time, we have lost so much of time and not have had the results that we hoped for is stressful. As someone who has really high hopes with the degree and with the learning experience, just not having the ability to do that at the moment feels stressful. And I just hope this ends soon, because now it's been enough and it's suffocating. Also because just the stress of the degree, the stress of not being able to meet people, not being able to socialize, the isolation, the inability to meet people, to go out is extremely suffocating. Because my supervisor does encourage taking breaks, going on holidays, and he's quite good with it. He doesn't really restrict on how many holidays you take or where you go. He believes in work hard, play hard, and that has been the culture in my lab. We do have this culture of having lab trips, going on holidays together, but that's just not been possible, and it just feels really bad. I know everyone has suffered from something of the same extent around the world, but being in that situation, living through this, and having a certain amount of hopes being crushed is just a bit stressful. And to be honest, it's a lot stressful at this point in time. It's been a year now. So although I do have all the support I need, I do have my supervisor and colleagues checking in on me, and I have support from college, and my progress reviews have been good. We do have progress reviews every 3 months, and they've been really good, that I have been making some progress with my project. But it's like a lot of things had to be pushed back. A lot of my project milestones have been pushed back and modified and changed in some way or other. And it also makes me think that maybe I'm not putting in the right amount of effort, or I'm not planning too well. It just becomes a negative loop when it starts, and I hope it just ends. There's an end to it soon. All in all, it's just been a crazy experience, and I think it's been for everyone around the world. My sincere prayers go out to everyone who's struggling, no matter if they are a student, in their jobs, and I hope it just ends soon and we find a better outcome and a better future. I think I will end this here before I go on ranting about it. And if anyone wants to rant and have a chat about what's going on, please comment down below and I would be happy to chat with you. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched it to the end and you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. And I would see you in the next video. Bye.